What just happened inside that courtroom has Hollywood stunned the internet on fire, and Blake Lively's team scrambling like never before. The verdict is in and the fallout immediate. Explosive, devastating. For months the world watched as Blake Lively, once America's golden girl, walked a tightrope of legal drama, celebrity reputation, and courtroom gamesmanship. But no one, not her fans, not her fiercest critics, not even her own legal team, could have predicted the jaw-dropping moment the jury finally spoke. The decision landed like a bombshell. Inside the courtroom, jaws dropped, outside chaos erupted. But it was Blake's reaction that captured the world's attention. Her courtroom breakdown, real, raw, and completely unfiltered, was broadcast to millions. For the first time, the carefully crafted Hollywood image shattered in full view. And suddenly the question wasn't if this would affect her career, it was how fast the empire might crumble. This isn't just another celebrity headline. This is a reckoning, and it's far from over. Behind the scenes, her legal team is in full panic mode. Brand sponsors are backing away, subpoenas are flying toward influencers, and former allies dead silent. So what exactly did the jury say that pushed Blake Lively over the edge? What shocking new revelations have surfaced since that meltdown? And why is the entire entertainment industry now asking, did we get Blake Lively completely wrong? Strap in, because what's happening here isn't just a verdict. It's the unraveling of one of Hollywood's most carefully protected images. And trust us, you haven't heard the last of this story, not by a long shot. The courtroom was dead silent. The tension had reached such a fever pitch that you could practically hear the collective gasp ripple across the gallery. Cameras outside the courthouse captured the growing crowds, journalists scrambling for updates, and legal experts stunned by what had just transpired. No one, not even the most seasoned analysts, could have predicted this. The jury's decision wasn't just surprising. It was a complete curveball, a ruling that threw the entire Blake Lively case into disarray. And in the middle of it all, Blake herself appeared visibly shaken, her poise finally cracking. After months of mounting pressure, legal strategy, and high-stakes maneuvering, just moments after the 4% read the verdict aloud, Blake's legal team rushed to her side, whispering urgently. Her eyes darted around the room, trying to absorb what had just happened. She blinked rapidly, her jaw clenching ever so slightly, trying to maintain her composure. But the cracks were obvious. This wasn't just a tough day in court. This was a full-blown meltdown, and the cameras caught every second of it. But to understand the magnitude of this courtroom bombshell, we need to rewind. Because this trial from the beginning was never about just one incident. It became a referendum on celebrity power, media manipulation, and whether the legal system could hold a Hollywood A-lister accountable. Blake Lively, once known for her roles in Gossip Girl and high-profile brand deals, has been embroiled in a legal firestorm for months. Allegations of defamation, targeted subpoenas, and explosive whistleblower claims transformed this case from a private dispute into a nationwide spectacle. As the trial gained momentum, so did public scrutiny, and Blake, often known for her calm, composed public image, found herself at the center of an unraveling narrative. Her legal team, led by powerhouse attorneys and supported by top-tier PR strategists, had been confident in their approach. For weeks they argued that the claims against her lacked foundation, that the public and press were jumping to conclusions based on partial leaks, viral speculation, and internet commentary. But in court the tide slowly began to turn. Witnesses, who were initially hesitant, began speaking up. Text messages once thought to be off-limits were introduced as evidence. And suddenly the defense's airtight narrative started developing holes. Then came the jury, a cross-section of regular citizens sworn to evaluate the facts and determine the truth. For weeks they sat quietly, observing the unfolding drama, weighing conflicting accounts, and sorting through an avalanche of digital exhibits. Their expressions gave nothing away. Even seasoned court reporters admitted they couldn't get a read on where the jury stood. Some days it seemed they leaned toward Blake. Other days the plaintiff's emotional testimony seemed to sway the room. So when the verdict was announced, a partial decision that found Blake liable on key claims, the reaction was immediate. Gasps echoed through the courtroom. The plaintiffs appeared visibly moved, some shedding tears. Blake, in contrast, sat frozen, blinking as if trying to wake from a dream. Then the meltdown began. In real time, the press captured the moment. Blake stood gripping the edge of the defense table as if to steady herself. Her attorney placed a reassuring hand on her back, but Blake brushed it off. Her face was flushed, eyes wide, and for the first time, the cracks in her carefully curated public persona were undeniable. Cameras outside picked up her legal team's huddled conversation, reportedly debating whether to request an emergency recess due to emotional distress. It wasn't just the verdict that rattled her. It was the realization that this case, which she may have believed she could control, was now out of her hands. The jury's decision sent shockwaves through the entertainment industry. Social media lit up within minutes. Hashtags like hashtag Blake Lively verdict, hashtag justice served, and hashtag Hollywood accountability trended worldwide. Even fellow celebrities who had previously remained neutral began weighing in, posting cryptic messages and resharing courtroom updates. Inside the courtroom, the judge called for order as murmurs grew. Several audience members, including journalists, legal scholars, and even a few influencers who had been subpoenaed earlier in the trial, exchanged glances. The general consensus: this was no longer just a legal loss, this was a reputational earthquake. What made this meltdown so stark wasn't just Blake's emotional reaction. It was how uncharacteristic it was for her. For years she had cultivated a brand rooted in elegance, restraint, and grace under pressure. She was the polished red carpet staple, the stylish wife to Ryan Reynolds, the savvy businesswoman. Yet here she was on one of the biggest legal stages imaginable, visibly spiraling. And the cameras didn't miss a beat. Later sources close to the legal team would leak that Blake had not expected this outcome and was devastated by the jury's conclusions, that her lawyers were considering next steps, including a possible appeal or even a full public statement, something Blake had previously avoided throughout the case. But as the footage circulated, Blake wiping tears, her voice quivering as she responded to reporters' questions with a curt no comment. The damage was already done. Back at her legal headquarters, chaos reportedly erupted. PR strategists rushed to draft statements. Publicists canceled all upcoming interviews. Even brand sponsors allegedly began calling to reevaluate partnerships depending on how things unfolded. The ripple effects of the verdict were immediate and brutal. Meanwhile, outside the courthouse, the crowd had doubled. Supporters and critics alike held up signs. Some were calling for accountability and transparency, others simply wanted answers. How had a case that started as a dispute over speech spiraled into a national media event? The answer, many experts say, lies in the unprecedented nature of this trial. Rarely does a Hollywood star of Blake Lively's stature get pulled so deeply into courtroom controversy, much less one that plays out in full public view. Add to that the digital age, with TikTok creators dissecting testimony, live-streamed updates, and Twitter threads turning court filings into trending topics, and it became impossible for Blake to control the narrative. In the early weeks of the trial, her team had dismissed much of the online speculation as noise, but it didn't stay online. It seeped into the courtroom. Some jurors admitted during voir dire that they'd already seen viral videos discussing the case, and while they were instructed to avoid outside commentary in today's media-saturated world, total isolation is a fantasy. That's where the whistleblowers come in. Key to the prosecution's success were a handful of former associates and insiders who agreed to testify, some under subpoena, others voluntarily, about Blake's behind-the-scenes conduct. Their testimonies, while often emotional and difficult to corroborate, fully painted a picture that clashed sharply with Blake's public image. It wasn't just about defamation claims anymore, it became about trust, power, and truth. One particularly damning moment came when a former PR assistant whose identity had been kept sealed until the day of testimony shared journal entries and voice memos from their time working with Blake. These records, while not smoking guns in a legal sense, resonated deeply with the jury. The assistant described moments of pressure, veiled threats, and a toxic work culture that, while subtle, suggested a carefully guarded ecosystem of control. Legal analysts were quick to caution that personal conduct doesn't always translate to legal liability, but the court of public opinion doesn't operate on legal precedent. And for Blake, the damage was dual: legal consequences on one hand and public fallout on the other. In the days leading up to the verdict, many believed the worst was over. Blake had survived the most heated testimony. Cross-examinations had poked holes in the whistleblowers' stories. Her team appeared calm. But now, with the verdict delivered and the narrative shifting dramatically, the battle has entered a new phase. Behind the scenes, insiders say a major shakeup is underway. Some members of Blake's legal team are reportedly reconsidering their roles, others are urging her to settle quietly before additional claims snowball. There are whispers that new subpoenas may be on the horizon, possibly targeting influencers who were involved in public commentary about the trial or received leaked information. The legal web is widening, and no one seems to know where the end lies. The public, however, has already made up its mind. Overnight polls showed a dramatic shift in sentiment. Once seen as the victim of online speculation, Blake is now viewed by many as emblematic of unchecked celebrity power. Meanwhile, her critics are gaining traction, and even former allies in the industry are distancing themselves, at least publicly. But perhaps the most haunting image of the day came not from inside the courtroom, but from a video taken just outside the courthouse. In it, Blake, walking briskly with her attorneys, pauses for just a moment. A reporter calls out, "Do you still stand by your statements?" Blake turns, her face visibly drawn, and after a beat simply says, "This isn't over." Then she's gone, swallowed by the waiting SUV cameras still flashing, and she's right. This isn't over, not by a long shot, because with this verdict a new chapter has begun. The courtroom meltdown may have shocked the world, but it's only the beginning of a much deeper reckoning, one that could reshape not just Blake Lively's future, but the very way we think about celebrity accountability in the age of transparency. The day after the verdict, the aftermath began to snowball in a way few could have predicted. Blake Lively's name dominated every headline, not for a red carpet appearance or a brand campaign, but for one of the most emotionally charged courtroom reactions caught on record. As the sun rose on a shaken Los Angeles, publicists, attorneys, producers, and fans woke up to a new reality. The Blake Lively everyone thought they knew might never return. Inside sources close to the courthouse revealed that Blake's team stayed behind, long after the gallery had cleared. Behind closed doors, heated discussions unfolded between her lead counsel and external crisis managers flown in just days prior a sign. They'd begun preparing for this very scenario. Witnesses from inside the building reported hearing sharp tones echoing through the conference room walls, and at least one staffer was seen leaving in tears. The strategy now was damage control, not just legally but publicly. While a post-verdict appeal was being explored, that process would take time, and the more immediate problem was perception. Blake's courtroom meltdown had gone viral, shared and dissected across every platform. Every blink, every gesture, every strained breath had been turned into GIF slow-motion clips, and endless hot takes by creators, commentators, and casual observers. Worse for Blake was that the meltdown wasn't being viewed with sympathy. Instead, it was being treated as a spectacle, confirmation in the eyes of many that she'd lost control. Memes surfaced almost instantly, juxtaposing her poised magazine covers with raw footage from court. Side-by-side comparisons showed the carefully polished celebrity image unraveling in real time, and the tone had shifted from curiosity to critique. But the narrative didn't stop at internet commentary. Entertainment industry insiders were watching too and making calls. One streaming platform executive leaked anonymously to a Hollywood trade publication that they were now reevaluating their relationship with Blake amid ongoing reputational concerns. Another source close to a high-profile fashion house confirmed they were pulling a campaign featuring Blake until further notice. And then came the unexpected twist. The jury foreperson gave a rare post-verdict interview, speaking under anonymity. To a major news outlet, the juror offered chilling insight into the decision-making process. "It wasn't one moment," the juror said. "It was the accumulation, the tone of her statements, the inconsistencies, the feeling that there were layers we weren't being shown. You get a gut feeling even through the evidence. Something didn't sit right." That statement rocked the media sphere. Suddenly, it wasn't just a verdict. It was a verdict backed by instinct, a collective consensus from a panel of citizens who had no investment in Hollywood, no need to preserve PR images. It painted a picture of Blake as someone who intentionally or not had lost the trust of a neutral audience. And in Hollywood, trust is everything. As fallout continued, attention turned to those caught in the crossfire: influencers, YouTubers, and online creators who had once analyzed the case from afar were now being pulled into the storm. Some had received cease and desist letters from Blake's team even before the verdict. Others were named in court documents as possible information conduits. Now, with Blake's legal strategy shifting into post-verdict territory, new subpoenas were reportedly being considered, not to silence these creators necessarily, but to investigate potential leaks and damages tied to public commentary. That tactic, however, was already backfiring. Creators began speaking out. Some posted full breakdowns of their experiences with Blake's legal team. Others warned their followers of a growing pattern, one where celebrity teams attempted to silence independent voices under legal pretense. Hashtags like #YouCan'tSilenceUs and #CreatorsUnderFire began trending. Blake wasn't just losing fans, she was losing the narrative. And then came the second blow. A whistleblower who had remained anonymous throughout the trial, known only in court filings as Witness X, came forward publicly. In a televised sit-down interview, the former stylist, who had worked with Blake for over 3 years, spoke candidly about the behind-the-scenes culture. While careful not to accuse Blake of any criminal wrongdoing, the stylist described a pattern of isolation, manipulation, and silent retaliation, a world where one misstep could cost you your job, your career, your sanity. The interview was raw and devastating. And while Blake's legal team rushed to dismiss it as a disgruntled former employee, the timing couldn't have been worse. Public sentiment, already shifting after the verdict, now accelerated against her. Posts that had once praised her elegance now echoed with disappointment. One viral tweet simply read, "It's always the ones who smile the brightest." Even in private circles, the mood had turned. Anonymous reports from insiders said that some of Blake's closest allies had gone silent. Friends who had once posted support now posted nothing at all. And in Hollywood, silence is never neutral, it's calculated. As the dust settled, speculation mounted over what Blake's next move would be. Would she issue a public apology? Launch an appeal? Withdraw from the spotlight altogether? Sources close to her hinted at internal debates over whether to address the verdict head-on or quietly regroup. One option under discussion was a sit-down interview with a major outlet, an Oprah-style reckoning, though others in her camp reportedly warned that now was not the time. Meanwhile, her husband Ryan Reynolds faced his own set of challenges. Though not directly involved in the case, Ryan's public support or lack thereof became a hot topic. Observers noted that he had gone unusually quiet during the final weeks of the trial, even skipping a major promotional event. Rumors swirled that tensions were high behind the scenes, with some speculating that the stress of the case had put a strain on their marriage. But Ryan wasn't the only one watching from the sidelines. Taylor Swift, once one of Blake's most high-profile allies, had also gone conspicuously silent. Swifties ever watchful noted the absence of any public support from Taylor during the trial. And when Taylor posted a cryptic lyric caption just hours after the verdict, fans erupted with speculation. Was it a subtle distancing, a quiet commentary? No one could say for sure. But the silence spoke volumes. As days passed, the legal team filed preliminary paperwork signaling their intent to appeal. But experts warned that appeals are uphill battles and rarely shift public perception. More importantly, legal analysts pointed out that appealing could extend the case into the next year, keeping the story alive far longer than Blake might want. With every new court date would come fresh headlines, renewed scrutiny, and another round of public debate. And then, just as the fire seemed to be dying down, another spark hit the pile. An independent journalist published a comprehensive, investigative report featuring leaked documents previously sealed by the court. The documents, which appeared to be authenticated emails and PR memos, revealed internal discussions among Blake's team regarding strategies to reframe public narratives and discredit hostile digital voices. While some might argue these were standard media control tactics, others saw them as proof of a coordinated effort to manipulate perception. The backlash was swift. Commentators, podcasters, and creators unleashed a wave of new content dissecting the leaked memos. Major news outlets picked up the story with op-eds questioning the ethics of celebrity influence in the justice system. One headline read, "The verdict was just the beginning inside the Blake Lively media machine." In response, Blake's team released a brief, carefully worded statement denying the authenticity of the documents and condemning the leaks as unlawful and irresponsible, but the damage was already done. The public, hungry for transparency, was growing more skeptical by the hour. In boardrooms across LA and New York, executives whispered about what this meant for celebrity branding. Blake had once been the gold standard, the image of polished restraint. Now she was the subject of case studies in PR crisis mismanagement. Entire panels were being organized at media summits to analyze what went wrong, how it escalated, and what lessons could be learned. Back at home, Blake reportedly remained secluded, avoiding public appearances and turning down interview requests. Friends described her as shaken, guarded, and uncertain. Some even said she was considering stepping away from acting altogether, at least for the foreseeable future. And yet, despite it all, the courtroom meltdown, the viral backlash, the leaked memos, the dwindling brand deals, there was a sense that this wasn't quite the end. That Blake Lively wasn't finished, that something bigger was still brewing. Beneath the surface, some believe she's planning a comeback, a carefully timed, deeply controlled media return that would reframe her image and rebuild the public trust. Others believe she's too far gone, that the court of public opinion has already reached its final verdict. But one thing's clear. This trial, this verdict, this meltdown, it has permanently altered the trajectory of Blake Lively's career, and in doing so, it's forced a reckoning far beyond one celebrity. It's forced Hollywood to ask itself uncomfortable questions. How much influence is too much? What happens when image collides with truth, and who in the end controls the story? The third act of this saga wasn't marked by silence or retreat. Instead, it unfolded with an eerie calm, the quiet before what many feared would become an even more explosive storm. The media had barely caught its breath from Blake Lively's courtroom collapse when fresh waves of controversy began to swell beneath the surface. And this time, the spotlight turned toward a series of very strategic legal maneuvers, ones that raised more eyebrows than answers. Within a week of the jury's stunning decision, Blake's legal team began filing motions not just to appeal the verdict but to formally challenge the admissibility of some key testimony and evidence that had turned the tide. They alleged improper procedure, biased jury exposure, and undue influence from social media discourse. In legal terms, it was a shot in the dark. But in PR terms, it was a signal Blake wasn't letting this verdict define her legacy at least not without a fight. Some insiders saw this as defiance, others saw it as desperation. But either way, the motions prompted immediate scrutiny. Legal scholars debated the credibility of the claims while media critics questioned the timing. Was this truly about justice or about salvaging reputation in the court of public opinion? At the same time, Blake's inner circle began shifting subtly at first, then unmistakably. Longtime PR figures were quietly removed from their roles. One major Hollywood lawyer who had appeared confident and collected throughout the trial was replaced by a new, more aggressive litigator. A former federal prosecutor was brought in as a consulting strategist. This wasn't a cleanup operation, it was an escalation. And with that escalation came a more targeted effort to go after those who had, in Blake's view, unfairly influenced the outcome. Subpoenas were drafted, at least for prominent YouTubers, received notices requesting private messages, documents, and communications related to commentary made during the trial. These creators, many of whom had massive followings, took to their platforms to expose what they viewed as intimidation. One creator in a now viral live stream broke down emotionally while reading the subpoena aloud. "I never claimed to be a journalist," she said through tears. "I'm just a woman with an opinion. I watched the trial like millions of others. I spoke my mind. And now I'm being dragged into this." Her words sparked outrage online. Hashtags like #ProtectCreators and #Free Speech Fight surged to the top of trending charts. Legal experts weighed in, quickly warning that Blake's team may have overplayed their hand. Subpoenaing commentary creators, one analyst said, is risky. It can backfire. It makes the case look like a power play, a celebrity trying to silence public opinion instead of respecting the verdict. The backlash intensified when one of the targeted creators posted an internal email allegedly leaked by a whistleblower close to Blake's team, detailing how her legal advisors had mapped out high-risk commentary accounts to potentially go after. Though the email's authenticity was not confirmed, the optics were disastrous. It fed into the narrative that this wasn't about justice, it was about control. At this point, even some of Blake's longtime fans began expressing discomfort. Fan accounts on social media, once flooded with admiration, were now mixed with disappointment and concern. Comments like "I believed in her" and "This is not the Blake we grew up with" flooded Twitter and TikTok. Some even began deleting fan content altogether, calling it a form of protest. Behind closed doors, Blake was said to be in an emotional freefall. One source close to her team revealed that she'd taken time away from her family, retreating to a private estate in upstate New York, refusing all phone calls outside her legal counsel. "She's not well," the source admitted. "She feels betrayed by the jury, by the media, by the people she thought were on her side. She never expected the public to turn this fast." But the public hadn't turned without reason. The jury's decision had been the spark, but Blake's own choices, courtroom demeanor, legal strategies, silence on critical questions had fanned the flames. And now the embers were spreading beyond her personal brand. Corporate sponsors began withdrawing quietly. A global skincare brand removed Blake from their homepage. A streaming platform pulled a documentary she had narrated. A major fashion magazine postponed a cover story featuring her return to grace. Industry insiders whispered that this was the start of a full-fledged freeze-out, one that could stretch years. Amid the fallout, one surprising voice emerged: Justin Baldoni. The actor, director, and entrepreneur had remained largely quiet during the trial, despite once being at the center of much of the media speculation surrounding Blake. But now, as the storm gathered strength, he issued a carefully worded statement. On his Instagram stories, "There's always more to the story. I believe in truth. I believe in accountability. And I believe in moving forward with empathy." The post didn't mention Blake by name, but the message was unmistakable, and it didn't go unnoticed. Blake's defenders, fewer now but still vocal, argued that she was being unfairly demonized. That one courtroom loss didn't erase decades of professionalism, philanthropy, or artistry. They warned that the media cycle was feeding on itself, twisting complexity into clickbait. But their voices were being drowned out, especially when another revelation dropped: a court document unsealed by mistake. In the document, a private deposition transcript included a moment where Blake, under oath, was asked if she had personally approved a campaign to discredit whistleblower testimonies. Her answer: "I don't recall." It was the kind of answer that in legal terms is often used to avoid direct implication. But in public perception, it was damning. Screenshots of the document went viral. Commentators, journalists, and fans all jumped on the phrase. "I don't recall" became a punchline, a meme, a symbol of evasion. Late-night hosts cracked jokes about it. TikTokers reenacted the deposition with dramatic flair, and still Blake said nothing. She hadn't posted since before the verdict. Not on Instagram, not on X, not through any public outlet. Her silence, once seen as grace, was now interpreted as retreat or worse, guilt. In response, her team made one final attempt to shift the energy. A new statement was released, not from Blake directly but from her legal spokesperson. It read, "Ms. Lively has always conducted herself with integrity and professionalism. She is deeply disappointed in the recent verdict and is exploring her legal options. At this time, she respectfully declines to engage in public discourse that compromises the judicial process or her own healing journey," but it was too late. The moment had passed. The court of public opinion had moved on, not just from Blake, but from the version of her that had once captivated millions. Her once pristine legacy had become a case study in how fast power can dissolve, how influence can backfire, and how even the most polished personas can crumble under the weight of truth or perception. And yet in the quiet, something else was beginning to form. Some media insiders predicted a rebrand, a documentary, a reckoning. Others believed she would step away for years only to return as a changed woman, a survivor of the system. It had happened before to other celebrities, other scandals. Hollywood loves a redemption arc. But this one felt different. The damage wasn't just to Blake. It was to the system that had enabled her, and if the creators, journalists, whistleblowers, and jurors had anything to say about it, that system wasn't going to recover easily. Because this wasn't just a trial, it was a transformation. And for Blake Lively, that transformation came at the highest possible cost. Her image, her trust, her silence shattered before a jury of her peers, and a world watching in real time. In the end, Blake Lively's courtroom meltdown wasn't just a moment of personal vulnerability, it became a cultural turning point.